My name is Dr. Freddie Gaffney. I run the digital film production course at Ravensbourne. Ravensbourne is a university that was set up to teach people how to make television and to work in the arts. I introduced the film course around about 5 years ago now. So Ravensbourne gave BRASH Young Turks the opportunity to screen in front of students a few weeks ago. A great opportunity for us to have the director and producer and cast come down, talk to the students, and an opportunity for our students to see what lies ahead for them, someone who is in their early career making features. BRASH Young Turks, I think, is a really interesting film. It reminds me very much of some of the sort of vibrant movies that were coming out independently in the early 80s. Particularly, there's a film called Mona Lisa that it just echoes of in terms of the sort of dramatic direction and the character arcs. Really interesting in that respect. I think the movie was great. It had a sense of purpose. It had a sense of freshness. It was talking about a kind of, I guess, an underclass, really, and this sense that the world is there for taking. It's something that you don't see very often. It's something you don't hear very often. People get caught up a little bit in these overly dramatic plots. This was a really simple story with great rich characters who kind of pull at each other, and the characters themselves, some of them you spend your time rooting for, others you just want to slap. They were great in that respect, really rich and full. BRASH Young Turks is, for me, a different kind of film. Firstly, it's a film that is a London film. It's rooted. So many films today, they could be anywhere. This is a film about, not necessarily about Londoners, but about people in London. And it's that melting pot of London that I think is interesting. So that's the first sort of key difference about this, its root. And I think second, and I think most importantly, is its passion and energy. It's a film that, from the very first frame, is driving, and as an audience I think we get sucked in very quickly into that movie world, and I think from start to finish we're encapsulated in this very fresh London environment. It makes London look like in New York, and in that respect it offers a very different view of London whilst retaining the very sense of London as this, I guess, community of strangers. That's different. The characters were lovely. I like the characters a lot because they remind me of people I know. They give me a sense of the real anguish that we all go through, those self-inflicted wounds. And so these aren't perfect characters. These aren't people who are going to be one-dimensional. There's layers to them, and throughout the film they switch and they twist and turn around each other, and that, I think, there's a richness to that. The character of Mia, played by Melissa Latouche, I think is a really interesting character. It really represents young women today, and to quote film noir, I wasn't quite certain if I wanted to kiss her or slap her. She's the kind of character who has an innocence about her as she goes through the piece, and that innocence gets her into all sorts of trouble. But she also has a knowing determinism about her as well that helps move her forward and helps her grow and take control. So she's a really interesting sort of dual character. I think she's a possible rising star. And the other characters, beautifully crafted. The principal lead, who's driving this film with his ambition. Terrell has, I think, a terrific sense of charm and ruthlessness, and I think he's the most sort of, I guess, the most Thatcherite baby of all. And he has, his wonderful set of characters around him, supporting him and feeding off him. It's a lovely milieu. It's beautiful. There's no question that this is a film that is different from the sort of realist films like Ken Loach's work, for example. This is a film that's heavily stylised. It's in perhaps in places hyper-stylised. There are certainly moments within the film where it's like you're watching an advert. It's glossy, it's slick. I think that actually reflects the ambition of the characters in the film, which is fresh, it's new. The film reminds me very much of My Beautiful Laundrette in its hyper-stylised way, and I think the director Naeem Mahmood has a sense of that early Stephen Frears about him, both in the way he directs the cast, but also in the way that he structures the film, and I think that's quite remarkable in this age. American cinema has a massive impact on what we do here and on the filmmakers we produce. Most film schools have Hollywood modules, they study this stuff, and that has to seep into the filmmakers. Beyond that, what you have is another breed of filmmakers, the filmmakers who either, for whatever reason, haven't necessarily been exposed to that, or more likely the filmmakers who have consciously said, I don't want to make that stuff, I want to make something distinctively British. And I think BRASH YOUNG TURKS is distinctively British, even from there's that horrible word, the multicultural sort of angle. It's got characters of various races, but race isn't an issue in the film. It's got characters from different classes, but class doesn't seem to be an issue. It's the society that we live in, not a fictionalised, Americanised version of the UK. And I think that's a really interesting angle that is played out in this movie. The UK scene for movies is difficult. It's about finance, and most financiers are looking for that American angle so they can make as big a return as possible. So that means that the stories tend to get a little bit anodyne, they tend to get a little bit sanitised. When you see a film that's got a little bit of a raw edge to it, a film that has a sense of real people, real story, real events, and in BRASH YOUNG TURKS there is this lovely story of striving, and I think that's something that so many people can connect with, but they're very much part of an indigenous filmmaking culture, and I think it's really important to cultivate that. Now, that used to be cultivated by the BFI's film workshops and sort of filmmaking groups up and down the country. These got slowly eroded over decades. They don't exist really anymore. Today, a filmmaker who wants to make this kind of movie will usually have to self-finance, and that's just hard. BRASH YOUNG TURKS doesn't sit in either of the two camps that British film normally does. This sort of urban, grimy, gritty story that dominates so much of British film now. BRASH YOUNG TURKS isn't that. It isn't about gangster thieves cutting each other up and all that kind of stuff on an estate. Similarly, it's not the heritage movie. It's not London as this wonderful playground, in a sort of Notting Hill kind of way. It's London, I think, as perhaps the majority of young Londoners see London. London as this vibrant, new place that's constantly evolving and constantly changing. And the film has got a kind of gritty undertone to it. And yes, it does have these beautiful London skylines, but it's not about either of those. It sits somewhere different, and that place is somewhere special, I think.